can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this. My music hits me so hard.
Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today with Tag back on the channel in Clash Royale. Tag, how you doing, man? Welcome back.
Hey, what's up, Ash? I'm doing fantastic.
It's glad to hear it, man. You have been an incredibly popular request on the channel. People love hearing you talk about decks, and I'm excited to break this one down today. It is a graveyard spawner kind of deck, I guess a graveyard goblin hunt deck at least. Man, just break down this deck and tell us why it's so good. You recently used it in RPL and had tremendous success with it, so I'm interested to hear about it. I do have a few questions as well, but let's go ahead and break it down first.
Yeah, so for sure, man. The premise of all graveyard decks is going in for graveyard poison. You kind of want to play passively until double Elixir. So because you have Goblin Hunt, you can play that as your initial starting play, and you can just feel out your opponent, determine when you're up Elixir, and get your damage when you're actually able to safely drop your graveyard and know what their cards are in cycle. So basically this deck is very passive, and I don't really go in for too many graveyards in single Elixir unless I know what type of deck they're running and I know I can get damage. The other thing about this deck, graveyard is not very strong in this meta besides this deck. And the reason why this deck is so much stronger than all the other graveyard decks is it has Musketeer and it has Goblin Hunt. Musketeer and Goblin Hunt, those cards on defense provide so much utility. They're really good against all the Golem decks that are out there, all those tank decks, because if they end up poisoning your Musketeer or they poison your Goblin Hunt, you can go in for graveyards after you defend, and then they don't have poison in cycle. Poison is actually so good in the game right now. It's probably the best spell for sure. And it denies all but one or two skeleton hits. And because of that, graveyard really isn't traditionally that strong. But because you can bait out the poison with the Spear Goblin Hunter and the Musketeer, you can actually get significant damage with the graveyard reliably.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, man, because I feel like graveyard's in such a tough spot with the poison. And you took the words right out of my mouth. So we're going to talk a little bit about when to use or how to get around the poison and when to use graveyard, how to use graveyard in this deck. You know what? Let's just hop into the first replay. That cool?
Yeah, sounds good, man.
All right, cool. And look at your profile, man. You're almost at 700,000 cards won. Are you serious, dude?
Yeah, the grind never stops. I guess
You're
I guess
a
I'll be
beast,
hitting a million soon. Probably by the end of the year.
Yeah, 1 million. Wow. Yeah, good luck, man. I'm going on 150,000. I thought that was pretty good. I guess you put me to shame. All right, let's go ahead and hop into the first replay here. 3, 2, 1, play against Saros. So, yeah, just kind of talk us through like the usual stuff you're tagged, just like the opening plays, what you're trying to do at the beginning of a match.
So with this deck in particular, the first replay, I actually subbed out the Royal Ghost for the Knight because Royal Ghost might get nerfed in the next patch, or if any of you guys don't have the Royal Ghost, feel free to sub it out for the Knight, and as you guys will see in this game, it actually works out pretty well. One of the things that I really don't like doing at the start of the game, I really don't like cycling my guards if I have them. I'd rather cycle an Ice Golem, I'd rather cycle my Royal Ghost, or I'd rather cycle my Knight. And the reason behind that is the guards actually just do so much more DPS on defense. They do really well against Goblin Barrel, and they do really well against like a Hog Rider compared to like a Royal Ghost against a Hog Rider. Gets less hits, gets one less hit. So if you can conserve your guards, it's going to be a lot more beneficial until you know what your opponent's running. So in priority of cycling, I would either cycle my Knight or Royal Ghost or Ice Golem, then maybe my Musketeer. But the initial card that I would always want to drop first is going to be the Goblin Hut. Never really want to drop the guards if I can keep that. And then, of course, never really going in for graveyards or graveyard poisons at the start. It's just generally a bad idea.
And this is kind of a dumb question, Tag, but like, how much Elixir are you comfortable investing to protect your Goblin Hut, if that makes sense? Like, in other words, if they just come down the lane with whatever, if they send a miner in at your Goblin Hut, are you always going to protect it?
So that's really an interesting thing, because when you see the miner pathing towards your tower, a lot of times people are going to go in for a miner on top of your tower and then try to poison the Goblin Hut and your tower. So if you drop guards, then you're just giving them even more value. So I don't like dropping guards. I like dropping a Knight or my Royal Ghost to defend the Goblin Hut. Sometimes I'll drop an Ice Golem to push the miner offside or off the tower if I can actually do that. But I never really want to commit with guards on defense against that. Goblin Hut, if a unit's going directly at the Goblin Hut, I'll drop my guards up higher. So if I drop my guards closer to the river, they can't get a poison value on top of the guards, the Goblin Hut, and the tower. Other than that, you have a two or three elixir card with the Ice Golem, the Royal Ghost, or the Knight. And I always feel comfortable using those to defend and protect my Goblin Hut.
Okay, another question about the poison in this deck is, or actually going against poison, because poison right now versus graveyard, I just hate it. I hate how much value it has, you know, hard countering at an elixir advantage. So are you ever, and I noticed you kind of did it on this last exchange here, but are you ever purposely providing poison value in some circumstances? In other words, pathing the Musketeer in between the Goblin Hut and the tower they're going for, just to lure it out, or is that not something you want to be doing?
In specific situations, I like doing that. Another situation, you can also go in for graveyard on offense, and then if they're running that golem deck with poison, sometimes they'll poison it, and if they have to poison it, then you can drop a Musketeer on defense and then also get the defensive value of a Musketeer, killing and chipping down the golem. So it can actually go both ways. So that was a pretty interesting question, honestly.
Okay, cool, yeah. There's so many questions with this deck, and I had questions as well on the Royal Ghost version, but I'll wait for that one. And again, here you're just being so patient with this deck, and you can kind of see what you talked about earlier. In terms of the graveyard placement, if your opponent does have poison, are you always going to put it where you put it there, just kind of so that one edge is really close to the tower?
Yeah, if you watch OJ's video, it's just the most optimal placement overall. It gets the most skeleton hits, so I always do that every single time. Okay,
cool. I do want to take a quick moment and give a shout out to Pittsburgh Steeler Fan. He is my YouTube sponsor of the day. Thank you, Pittsburgh Steeler Fan, and I apologize. I apologize for the tough weekend that you just had. Let's go ahead into the next replay here against PS. Now, PS is playing what could be the most notorious new bait deck. Are you a fan of this deck that he's playing, Tag?
Yeah, this is actually one of my second favorite decks in the game. Right now, wow. My first is going to be the Goblin Hut. The second one is this.
Oh man, I might have to have you back on the channel sooner rather than later here. But let's go ahead and press play on this one in 3, 2, 1, go.
Solid.
And again, just kind of walk us through this. And, you know, why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about Royal Ghost versus Knight. And is Royal Ghost a card that you ever play at the bridge to kind of just put an opponent in an awkward situation? Or is he always going to be played either reactively or behind your King Tower?
I like dropping it in the back at the start. Honestly, I don't even like dropping a bandit at the bridge at the start of the game. Sometimes I'll do that when I'm up elixir. I'll pressure with a Royal Ghost at the bridge, but for the most part, you always really want to play passively. When you're playing too aggressive and you're not calculating what your opponent could potentially have, you actually have no information at the start of the game. It's always better to play passively in my eyes. Okay.
So here you obviously know the deck already.
Yeah, I mean, he's running kind of a wacky variant, though. He has Fireball as well.
Yeah, so what's your mindset against this deck? You know, how are you going to be playing from here?
So this is going to be a very difficult matchup. This is one of the most, one of the more difficult matchups because you have Zap and he has Goblin Barrel. So it's not really ideal. In that situation right there, I realized that he overcommitted with a Goblin Barrel and I punished him really hard with a Graveyard. But for the most part, you guys are going to see in this game, I always save my guards. If you save your guards, you're going to be able to eat up 2 of the goblins by placing the guards either at the front of the tower or the back of the tower. You'll be able to eat up 2 of the goblin hits, and then the other one on the outermost tile of the tower will always get targeted by the tower first, so you won't have to worry about it. So
yeah, it sounds like guards are a really important card in this deck.
You really have to be aware and cognizant of what your opponent has, and if you got to match up your guards with your opponent's cycle, it is probably the most important card in this deck, honestly.
Tag, you said something just a moment ago that I just want to go back and touch on here. Is you knew that the opponent overcommitted with that Goblin Barrel on your left tower, and that's why you went all out. Do you have any tips for people? I know this is kind of an old topic, but I always like to hear maybe tips that you use to kind of know when they've gone too far. Or is it just kind of a sixth sense at this point for you?
It's definitely not even a sixth sense. I calculate the exact elixir that people are at. For the most part, in single elixir, I'm able to do that. In double elixir, it goes up too fast and I'm not able to determine what elixir they're at. So what I do is I monitor my elixir trades. For instance, if I drop a Royal Ghost, he drops a Prince. He's actually going to be, if I drop a Royal Ghost and he drops a Prince, I'm going to be up 2 elixir. Say I'm at 8 elixir, therefore he's going to be at 6 elixir. So you always want to monitor trades like that. And I don't know. I've just done it so often that I have all the elixir costs of the cards drilled into my brain. So I guess it kind of is a sixth sense from there. I don't have to think about it too much, but it's basically like simple addition.
And it seems like almost like card counting in blackjack or something, where you don't necessarily need to keep track of the number at all times, just a plus minus. Is that kind of correct?
Exactly. That's exactly what I do. And then I correspond that to my own elixir bar, the plus minus, and then just correspond that to your own elixir bar. And that's how you do it. That's the fastest and easiest way. Every other way is kind of unreliable. I don't think it's like physically possible to keep track in double elixir. I think it just goes too fast.
Yeah. Is there a way that you can get better at that? Or is it just practice makes perfect?
Practice makes perfect. And my number one tip is just not getting frustrated. It's going to be a process. It's really going to be a process. And just playing the game a lot will help you out because you're not going to have to think about elixir cost. And one of the biggest things is just like repeatedly doing it. It's like when you initially don't really know the spells that your opponent's running or the damage number of a spell. And you just got to keep playing the game. And then you'll be like, oh, poison right now does 216 damage at tournament standard. That's something important to know that, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's really solid advice. Let's keep moving along here and go against the next guy from Why So Nervous Clan, because I can't pronounce his name. Let's go ahead and press play on this one in 3, 2, 1, go.
Sounds good.
So what deck is this that we're going to get? I didn't even look at it first.
It's a Skeleton Barrel Poison cycle deck with Goblin Hut. So this guy had like 200, 300k challenge cards won, and he was running a Poison cycle deck with skeletons. So he should be able to actually... Matchup. Yeah, it's incredibly difficult because this guy should be able to outcycle me, get back to poison. One of the things that was really scary for me is you really have to, when they have a poison cycle deck like this really fast deck with Skeleton Barrel, he could actually outcycle my Zap. He should be able to with this deck. So the thing that I realized later on in the game is I actually had to utilize my Goblin Hut as often as possible to deal with the Skeleton Barrel. Or if I didn't have Zap and Cycle, I had to drop some guards or an Ice Golem or something off to the side. So after the Skeleton Barrel pops from my Musketeer shooting at it, it's going to go towards those units instead of my tower.
What made you just drop another hut behind the tower right there? Was it just awareness of the deck you're playing, or what was your thought process there? Oh, actually, that was the other guy. My bad. Is there ever a time that you're going to drop 2 Goblin Huts on the same side like that?
Yeah, I mean, in this type of matchup, it's stacking the Goblin Hut. It's the most annoying card in the game at the moment. I would definitely say that. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't really a great way of him dealing with my Goblin Huts besides poison. And if he poisons my Goblin Hut, then I can go in for a graveyard and punish him.
So you're basically trying to almost bait out the poison in a matchup like this.
Yeah, for sure. Otherwise, like, if he doesn't poison the Goblin Hut, I'm chilling too, because then I'm stacking up Spear Goblins. So,
of course, yeah.
Win-win scenario.
Okay, so at that point, when you, if the opponent gives you value for graveyard or poison, like for example, if they drop the pump in front of the King Tower, or if they drop that Goblin Hut like you saw in that last exchange, are you always just basically going to go in the graveyard poison because you get the value there?
Sometimes you can actually get like destroyed for doing that if you're down elixir, but if you're even elixir or if you're up elixir, I would say definitely do it if you have a satisfactory tank for your graveyard. So if you have an Ice Golem, definitely go in for it. But if you have like a Musketeer, you don't want to drop a Musketeer at the bridge and then go in for your graveyard, because the Musketeer can get easily countered by a Royal Ghost, and then you have to allocate so much elixir to defend that. So it's really down to what your card cycle is looking like and if you're up or even elixir. But for the most part, yeah, if there's a Princess, an Electro Wizard, a Goblin Hut, you want to actually go in for graveyard poisons if you can, because it's going to give you a lot of value. Your poison will definitely hit something for sure.
Okay, and what if, like, theoretically, obviously this is not the same deck, but if you're going against like a Golem deck in this situation right now, and he dropped a pump on the behind the right tower, how would you handle that? Would you just try to punish immediately, or would you poison the pump?
So if it was behind the tower, I would try to punish. Like, I would go in for a graveyard poison immediately. That's if you ever see a graveyard, or if you're running graveyard and they go for a pump behind the tower, that's just like...
No, I'm sorry, the other side though.
Oh, on the other side, yeah. I would switch lanes and go for that tower.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
No matter how low the other tower was, like even if it was like this low at 1300 or so?
Yeah, I still would. I mean, it's it's pretty important to make sure that they don't get an elixir advantage. All the golem has to do is be able to defend one graveyard, and if they're up elixir, it's going to be pretty horrible for you. It's also dependent on like their card cycle and what specific type of golem deck they're using, but for the most part, I always like punishing pumps because I feel like if I punish the pump and I'm even elixir with them, I feel like my defense is capable of just holding just about everything.
Yeah.
At least with this deck.
And you can see that you're just kind of, things have been closed up until now, but you're starting to get some more value here, especially with the Royal Ghost helping you out.
Mm-hmm. All it takes is one good trade with a Royal Ghost and the game's over. So
yeah,
with this deck, that's another great thing about this deck. You have an Ice Golem, you have guards, you also have Goblin Hut. So it's going to be very hard for them to actually break through with their Royal Ghost. And Royal Ghost is probably the most popular card in the game at the moment, so no, it's not too bad. Or if you don't have Royal Ghost and you end up having Knight in this deck, you'll have a third counter to the Royal Ghost.
Absolutely, and there you go. Almost done there. Just a few more HP. And you'll get it. There it is. Boom. Good game. What was the last... Should we do the last replay, or do you want to do it live? What do you want to do now?
Yeah, let's hop in the last one.
Sweet. It's against X-Wizard. Let's watch it. 3, 2, 1, play. All right, so this is a hog skeleton barrel deck. Really annoying. Okay, so how do you deal with a hog deck in general with this deck?
So Hog Rider, you really want to just make sure that you're dropping your Spear Goblin Hut in the correct placement. You guys probably will want to pay attention to where I'm placing the Spear Goblin Hut at all times against this deck. It's really, really important. Another thing is Skeleton Barrel. You just got to make sure that your timing of your zap is good. Notice I'm probably not going to miss a single zap the entire game, and I try to kill it as soon as possible, so then the skeletons don't even get a single hit on my tower, nor do they get to touch my Royal Ghost or Musketeer. So it's
okay,
just...
the timing on the zaps, is there anything like visual that you go by as an indicator or anything like that, or is it just kind of just practice?
Unfortunately, not really. It's obviously as it's about to drop, you probably want to zap a little bit preemptively before you see the skeletons actually, but it's mostly practice.
Yeah.
And you're going to mess up when you're practicing. It's something that you just kind of have to deal with. You have to make mistakes to get better. So if you're just doing the same thing over and over again, just be like, you know what? I'm going to zap the skeleton barrel, but like, I'm going to make sure that I like actually don't mess up the timing. I'm going to wait for to see the skeletons. That's not the right mindset to have, because you're never going to improve and you're always going to take damage, and your progress in the game is going to be stagnant. So you want to try.
That's good advice. Yeah. So don't be afraid to take risks when you're learning.
Exactly. There's nothing to be embarrassed about for when you're losing, or if you're losing in a GC or something like that. If it's a competitive match, maybe play a little bit differently, but don't treat every game like you're not allowed to make mistakes.
Do you find that you yourself play more, like switch your play style to be a little bit more conservative when you're in like a big competitive match, like especially a live match?
So that's interesting, right? When I go into live matches, I'm the type of player that does not go into a match with a deck that I don't feel comfortable with. So all the decks that I play in RPL, CRL, CCGS, I've played those decks maybe 10 to 12 GCs that week with that deck.
Wow.
So I really know all the interactions. I know what I'm doing. I go into the match very, very confident in my placements and every single interaction with the specific cards in those decks. So that's one of those things that I don't really like leaving things up to chance.
Yeah, that's good. It's like almost like muscle memory for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's
do you have any, speaking of placements, do you have any placement tips on like maybe the Musketeer or any other key card in this deck? Like in terms of, things that maybe you do that you notice that some people make mistakes on?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is like you can drop your Spear Goblin up, or you need to drop your Spear Goblin Hut up a little bit higher, so then the Skeleton Barrel always goes towards it. And you always need to, like, at the start of the game, I'm sure you've seen Botcham, like his Tombstone placement. It's pretty much the same thing for the Goblin Hut. It's up a little bit higher, so then there's no pig push. There's no way of circumventing that. It needs to actually be able to draw units. And if you do that placement, there's actually usually, if they go and poison it, then there's going to be a little gap that you can drop your Musketeer in the corner. And if you do that, then the Musketeer can either hit the Golem without getting hit by the poison or whatever tank that they decide to drop. And it's really important to keep that Musketeer on the field and leave it on the field as long as possible, because that's the only way that you're going to get significant DPS to clean up a lot of their tank pushes.
Yeah, do you have any, I noticed, excuse me, that when sometimes you place the Musketeer even up at the river, almost, on your side. What circumstances would you want to do that on?
When you know that your opponent has poison and you can't actually punish them with a yeah, you need to keep that musketeer alive, and you have the means to keep the musketeer alive with an ice golem or a or guards, and you can't actually afford to let that musketeer die to a poison, because if the musketeer is near the goblin hut and they can poison it, then they're probably going to poison it. And if you're not able to counter push with graveyard, you're not going to get any utility out of it. So you always have to weigh your decisions of your placement of your musketeer based on, can I actually defend my musketeer if I place it here? And if they poison my musketeer, is it actually going to be a good trade for me to go in for a graveyard? So those are the two things I ask myself.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, man. So I think that we have a nice review of this deck. I love having you on, as always. Please do tell us a little bit about what's been up on your YouTube channel. I know you've been putting a lot of effort and energy into that, and the content's gotten really good. So you guys should go subscribe. Obviously, if you haven't already, you're missing out if you haven't. But what's coming up, man?
Yeah, so actually I got a 12-0 with this deck, and that's going to be on the channel soon.
Sweet.
Yeah. Usually I put up a lot of 12-0 victories, or not just 12-0, but usually like 12 win gameplay on Grand Challenge. So if you guys are looking forward to seeing like the most up-to-date meta decks or some of the better ladder decks, I usually only put up decks that I like a lot personally. I don't really like putting up decks that aren't going to work out or that aren't strong, that are kind of like a joke. I always go for the decks that are going to get someone better, or actually just are actually going to be pretty strong throughout various metas.
Awesome, man. Well, definitely looking forward to the next deck that you put up. You actually shared a graveyard deck a couple weeks ago that I was just watching that seemed really interesting, but you like this one better now?
Yeah, I like this one a lot better now. That one was more so at the start of the meta. We were still figuring things out. It was really strong for a couple weeks, but this one has definitely surpassed it in just almost every way.
All right, cool. Well, I'll link that one just in case anybody wants to watch a different version of a graveyard deck. But stay tuned certainly for the 12 win using this deck. And any other shout outs, anything like that before we let you go, Tag?
Yeah, so another thing that I've been trying to keep up to date with, and actually trying to grow a little bit, is my Instagram. It's at SirTagCR. I'm going to be putting up decks pretty weekly, or I'm going to be putting up some tips and tricks as well. So one of the tips or tricks that will be on my Instagram, it's going to be surrounding a Royal Ghost with a Goblin Gang, and then I also kept the Goblin Gang alive. Like, I kept 3 of the Stab Goblins alive. So surrounded the Royal Ghost, countered the Royal Ghost, and then 3 of the Stab Goblins survived. That's an interaction that you can actually do, and that will be up on my Instagram if you guys want to check it out, at SirTagCR.
Awesome. That will be up today?
Yeah, that'll be up today.
Sweet. Look forward to that, man. Well, heck, man, that's a lot of stuff to keep up with, but definitely all worth it for you guys out there, the Instagram and the YouTube channel. So anything else, man?
No, man. Thanks so much for having me, and it was a pleasure.
No problem, man. Always love having you on the channel. So, guys, that is going to do it. Hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did. Make sure you go check out Tag's information in the description below, as well as Bren Chong, my YouTube sponsor. Check out him and thank him for all he does in the community. Guys, thanks so much for watching all the way till the end. Really appreciate it. And as always, take care, guys.